is a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Living Well, where we attend to the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Holmes, and I'm so happy that you've joined us this evening. I think that tonight's episode will bless you in ways that you've never imagined. Did you know that isolation can have a detrimental effect to your health that is similar to smoking 15 cigarettes a day? Yes, being by yourself is not good. Think about it. God created us to be in relationships, right? To be in relationship first with Him because He was lonely, and then created Adam a companion because He said it's not right for man to be alone. So today we're going to talk about relationships, the importance of relationships and how to form relationships. But we put a spin on it. We're talking to the men. Men, how is your relationships? How is your relationship? How are you having relationships? Are they the relationships you desire, or are you isolating? Today, we want to move you from isolation to connection. So stay with us. Women who are watching, call your husbands, your sons, your uncles, your nephews, your friends, your co-workers. Have them watch this episode so that we can be a blessing to all that will hear. All right, stay tuned. Well, it is time for the water cooler conversation. This is where we come out of our offices. We gather around the water cooler to talk about what's hot, what's great, what you all are talking about, what's going around social media, or some topic that we can lend our professional and personal insights to. So we're going to watch a clip. Once we watch this clip, we're going to come back on the other side and talk about it. Let's go.
That's what we understand about loneliness now, that loneliness isn't about the number of people around you. It isn't about how popular you are. It doesn't matter how many people are surrounded by you. If you don't feel understood, if you don't feel seen, if you don't feel heard, you're lonely, right? Like, that's what it is.
Loneliness, right? I remember the old folks used to say, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And I love the fact that he said, loneliness is not about the number of people that you're surrounded by, but if you don't feel heard, if you don't feel understood, then it creates an internal sense of loneliness, which means that you can be lonely and isolated in a crowd.
Absolutely. And you could be amongst a large crowd of people and still not feel seen and or heard.
Right.
And still feel lonely. It is so interesting to me when we think about, we've had this conversation before about the number of people, their friends, like that they have on social media. And it gives you this false sense of like, well, we know that there is no connection, but no matter how many friends you have, are you connected with them, and do you feel seen and or heard? And most times, if without any connection, you're not going to feel those kinds of things. You're not going to feel connected.
Exactly. We can talk about a large crowd. Right. We can talk about folks in a large crowd feeling lonely, but also it goes to this idea, which I'm quite sure you've heard, I've heard when doing couples therapy, that folks can feel lonely in a marriage or a relationship. So they're there with their person. That person might come home every day. They're there together on the weekends, but they feel lonely because they're not feeling seen, they're not feeling heard. I want to read something that I found when reading one of the journals on May the 2nd of last year, the Surgeon General released a report, and it's called Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. So this is the U.S. Surgeon General. And one of the things that the Surgeon General warns is that there are physical consequences of poor connection. That's connection to other people, right? Social isolation. And those consequences can be devastating, including a 29% increased rate of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults. So when we talk about the physical consequences of a social emotional state, when we talk about loneliness and isolation, that is a social emotional state. There are consequences to not being connected. That's not to say that having your alone time, having your downtime, needing time to yourself is not important.
Right.
That's important. It can help you to rejuvenate, but not having social connections, not being in relationship to others affects your physical being as well as your social emotional, which is your psychological being and presence.
And that article just reiterates how dangerous it is.
Yes.
I mean, who associates loneliness with something being dangerous?
Right.
It's laid out right there.
Exactly.
It literally can be dangerous, dangerous to our mind, body, and soul. And it's, it is, I think that there are a lot of people who really don't even take that concept and really, really take that into consideration. Not even understanding that we're talking about a state of being.
Yes.
And being in a marriage and feeling lonely is a dangerous place to be, a very dangerous place to be.
Yes.
So
I think that, as we think about ourselves as whole beings, that God created us as whole beings, we need to underscore the importance of nurturing your relationships. If you're having difficulty or struggling maintaining social relationships, you might need to go and talk to someone to find out or figure out what's happening or going on with you, that you're having difficulty making those connections, because some people do. Sometimes it's because of their childhood growing up or past traumas or current traumas or past hurts that they've had either in intimate relationships and even friendships.
Right.
That maybe you can talk to someone, and of course, what we say, pray that you are praying to God and you're asking Him to reveal to you, and also asking Him to bring people into your life. I think what's most important to take away is that being by yourself can have really, really detrimental consequences to your mind, to your heart, to your body, and to your soul.
Absolutely.
So stay connected. And with that, we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to transition. We have some very, very wonderful guests who are going to talk about the importance of connection and how to maintain those connections. So let's go. Okay, so I know that I say every episode we have special guests, but for real, today we are joined by three very, very special guests who are Faithful Central Bible Church's own pastors that are in the house. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Pastor Bob Gay, who one of the hats that he wears is over men's discipleship here in the house. We have Pastor Rondell Eskridge, who one of the hats that he wears in the house is he's the pastor of our youth. And then we have the pastor of digital discipleship, Dee, pastor of digital discipleship. And you all know him. He's our resident guest and blogger here on Living Well. We have Pastor J. Patrick Wise. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
On this episode, we're so excited. This is something that we often don't do here, and also you don't see a lot in the mental health or health space. Men talking. And we've been doing a series on relationships and how those are so important and vital to your mental health. And also lack of relationships has been shown to have detrimental effects on the physical. And so how we relate to each other. And I thought, we need to have men on. We're not men, right?
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
Amen.
So we wanted to get men talking and hear more from you about how our male relationships are formed and how important they are and all the good stuff about men. So we're going to let y'all talk a little bit. We're going to try to stay out of it, kind of, sort of. We have some questions for you, but we really want to emphasize the importance of men being connected to each other and how important that is in the body of Christ and also just walking out their everyday lives. So, let's start with grown men. Do grown men have friends? And is it important for them to? Grown men.
I do. And my wife knows who he is, for example. So, yeah. So whenever she wants to move me in a direction, she really focuses on talking to two people. One is God, and the other is a brother I meet with every week on Fridays usually at this same time. Charles DeCure. And so that's the connection. And so we regularly meet. We regularly talk through personal and ministry issues. So it's clearly healthy, and it's been going on for maybe 10, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Sounds amazing. Definitely. I would say that men's circles tend to be smaller, but I have about maybe 4 or 5 fellas that I constantly communicate with. Different ways, text message, when the game is on, when I'm going through something, when my wife is saying something I don't understand and I need to unload or what have you. So, and that has been the case, I would say since my early 20s. It's been the same guys. I think the hard part is you don't really get good at adding people to it. If you do add to it, that means the other person is really solid. Men don't really take frivolous relationships. We can be cordial. Hey, seeing you here or there, but to add to it means that you fit in a way. Yeah.
No, I agree with everything that they said. Men need friends, and normally as you age, that circle gets smaller. Now, the problem is when that circle becomes so small, it's a period.
No. There's a circle of one.
Yes. Or maybe, just one, maybe two. Because now you have to learn how to show up for one another. And you have to, kind of like we were talking about earlier, learn how to decode your friend's soul. And that's one of the benefits of having, like Pastor Rondell said, prolonged friendships. I can interpret a sigh. I can interpret a bruh.
Right.
Yeah, man. That's 15 words.
Let me tell you what she did today.
Yeah.
And that means we about to talk. You know what I mean? Men the conversations may not be long, but if I say that, then he knows we're about to have a conversation that could be lengthy.
It's the male interpretation of girl. That's what it is. That's the male trans. Now you understand. You understand.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
And there are variations of that. Man, let me tell you what she did today. Man, bruh.
Right.
Hey. Sometimes it's just that sound. Hey.
Right.
And you just know, okay, I need to put my phone down.
Right.
I need to just block out some time because my friend needs me. And since he's my friend, since he's my brother, it's an honor to show up for him in this moment.
Right.
And my wife gets it. She knows the difference between like my friend just hitting me up and me saying, hey, Eric called. Like if I say Eric called, she like, okay, let me leave you alone. Let me take Lil Dell away. You know what I mean? He's going through something. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know. We speak in tones and different things like that, and she has learned to pick up on it.
Wow, and I was listening and I'm hearing that. Well, one, it sounds like there's a little bit of a difference in language, if you will, when you think about men relationships compared to women relationships. We have ours as well. But I'm wondering, what other ways would you say your male relationships are different from female relationships? Or are they? I mean, what would you say are the big differences?
Well, I've got a friend that I grew up with on the same block. So he knows a full width about my development. So my wife knows there's a difference, for example, when somebody calls me by my nickname. Yeah, don't ask. And when there's somebody calls me by my government name,
Right.
or when somebody calls me by Bob, she knows there's different stages. I suspect that's very much the same thing with women. There are some that you go way, way back with, and there's an intimacy, and how they address you is different than somebody that you were involved with on a professional level, or that you just met in a sorority or whatever the case may be. And I think guys do the exact same thing. And you kick it in very different ways. So I obviously disciple men, minister to men. There's a difference when I'm sitting with the guy with his problem and I'm listening. And whether we are early in the morning or whether we are talking about the challenges he has in his personal life and his professional life, I think women do the exact same thing. But men, that code is very, very different. And we know at what point we step over a particular line or we block out something. But we need to have people that go way back with us, and we need people who are intermediate, and we need people who are more frequent in our development.
Amen. I would say, at least from what I observe with women, there's this constant communication with, with friends who are women, right? It could be every day at some point during the day. I could wake up in the morning, my wife is on the phone, right? Or my cousin, they talking. I think men look for more meaningful encounters, right? So
you're now careful how you say more meaningful now.
No.
A different kind of encounter.
Less frequent.
Okay.
Right. But when it happens, it is more intentional, or it's like a catch up, more so than I got to talk to you every single day, right? So he can be my best friend, and we haven't talked in 2 weeks. And then once we get together, though, we just flush all this stuff out. Did you see what happened in the game? Did you see what happened on social media? How's your wife doing? It may be a catch all in that one conversation. I also noticed that when we are young, we are more frequent when we're young, especially if you aren't married. There's a very different, in your 20s, I might have seen my best friend at least 3 or 4 times a week. And we might have talked about anything that happened. We might have been texting back and forth all day long. I think once you get a little bit older and your responsibilities go up, men kind of have this understanding that I am moving forward and taking care of my family and responsibility. So there's no love lost. Whereas sometimes I see with, and I'm speaking from the outside in,
Right.
But if women don't communicate regularly, there could be like this, are we still cool like that? And so my wife has asked me, she's like, y'all ain't talked in a while. Y'all still cool? I'm like, why wouldn't we be cool? What's the problem?
Right.
I'm like, when we see each other or when we catch up with each other, it's like we haven't missed a beat. So I think that those are some of the differences where we want to have an amazing time with our friend, but it doesn't have to be that week.
Got it.
And sometimes not even that month.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that. I can say from my own experience, personal experience, and also, working with women, being around women, that oftentimes that has to be explicitly stated.
Yeah.
Like, girl, I'm busy. We probably ain't gonna be able to talk for a minute, but we good. I love you. You love me. But if it just happens, you just fall off. What? Exactly.
Right.
Did I do something? Like that? You good? Exactly. If it just fall off, wait a minute.
I gotta check the temperature.
Exactly. Exactly.
I would say one difference is that men can bond in silence.
Oh, that's good.
Like for instance, me and Rondell could sit and watch a game and not talk. But there's a bonding that's happening within that. Whereas what I've noticed with women and being an only child who's sat in salons growing up, women communicate feelings consistently. So it's more we bond around the understanding that you get where I'm coming from.
Wow.
I've heard women say things that are happening in their houses, for instance, that they would never say to their husbands, but the bond that is built amongst this cohort of women is around mutual understanding on an emotional level. Whereas men, we can communicate in events and timestamps and facts and the conveying of information. There's a bond that happens when you need a stat and I know the stat.
Wow.
Right? So there's a certain level of respect that's built there. And then the other thing I would say is one difference in how we communicate and how we, as a result bond is that if he comes to me with a problem, it's my goal to help him solve it. Whereas if I'm in communication with a woman, sometimes her mission is just for me to hear where she's coming from.
Exactly.
Yes.
She's like, I don't want you to solve it. I just want you to hear what I got to say.
That's right.
Jesus.
But if he's coming to me with something, he's like, let me go get my tools. Let me make a phone call. Let me send a text message. Let me send an email. Let me jump on Amazon. Whatever we need to solve this thing, we do that.
Yeah, and if you're not solving it, it's like, oh man, what you doing?
Why are you my friend?
Why are you here?
Yes.
You're not blocking for me. You're not running. You're not doing it. I don't. Here's the other thing, because this
Help
thing
me.
follows what you're saying. My wife and I check in every day. So whatever time we might get in or we see each other, how did your day go? Okay, and I almost know on certain days how things will go. I had staff meetings all day. All right, I know where that flow is going, okay? Or she knows we had a staff meeting here, then, so it's a very different communication than sitting with your guys talking about your kids, talking about your concerns about where they're going. Our daughters communicate with my wife differently than they communicate with me. They expect me to problem solve for them when something comes up, whereas my wife they are communicating process. They're talking it through. My sons and I hit it and say, okay, here it is, blah, 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 and we're done with that conversation. So it's a very different things, and I think it's cultural. I think you're trained part of that. I think part of that's your DNA, and how it might come about in America might be dramatically different than how it might work somewhere else in another part of the world. We would see in the community old guys sitting on milk crates outside of a liquor store or at the park playing dominoes.
Right.
And they're communicating. They're slapping bones, but there's a whole other communication going to playing bid whist. That's a whole different kind of communication. Women might go shopping together, and there's a whole different communication in that process.
Or eating.
And so, or eating, or any of those kind of things. And so it is, we as men have to understand when to shift and when to change. We can't take the male piece and super layer it over the women's piece and can't do the opposite kind of thing. So it's very, very different. And so it's a different dynamic. And here's the other thing. Pastor Patrick and I were walking back from Inglewood City Hall one day. I hope you remember
Walking
this.
from...
Yeah, walking. You remember that thing that it's not LA-ish, but we did it. And we were walking back. And he was talking about a relationship. And he asked me a question. And he said, what can you tell me? What wisdom can you impart for me with regard to this? And I said, marry for where you're going, not for where you are.
Saved my life.
And he was in the middle of a relationship. Okay. And so I think that when you shift from your individual relationships into your marriage relationship, that's long term. Your individual relationships might come and go, depending upon where you're moving, where you're living, your professional life, so forth and so on. But this marriage piece is dramatically different. And then the question is your spouse your best friend?
That's a whole nother question. I need to,
That is a whole other thing. I would say, you guys remember the scene in Soul Food where where he gets in trouble, he loses his job.
Yeah.
And then he shows up at his brother-in-law's house. Now, they don't talk regularly. They don't talk off. They got an understanding. They cool. They don't have no problem.
Right.
Shows up. Hey, I need to talk. He looks at his wife. His wife grabs the baby. They walk in the other room because the energy said, hey, this doesn't happen often. But he has somewhere to lay his burden. He says, hey, I lost my job. Should I tell my wife? He reaches in his pocket and says, don't tell her. He goes, you know what I mean?
Yes.
He talks a little bit about his situation. That's why it wasn't a long conversation. And problem solved. He like, okay, I don't think you should tell her. And since you're not gonna tell her, let me give you some money so that she don't recognize that something is off.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that when it comes to, as somebody brought up, how women communicate, or he said they don't layer on top of each other. I know that for my wife, when she relays a message to me, I gotta process it.
Right.
I gotta wait. You know what I mean? I gotta think about this thing all the way through. You know what I mean? And I feel like for a long time she didn't really understand what was happening because I wasn't processing outwardly like her. But I know that when I get with another man, like you said, if I say my problem and he's quiet for a while, I know he's processing it. Right? If he walks into another room, grabs something to drink, like I'm completely comfortable with him being quiet because I know he at least thinking about it, right? The pause does not offend me. But if I pause too long,
Are you listening?
are you listening? Right? So Patrick asked Pastor Bob a question. He says, okay. But he knows he coming with something good for me. And he got what he needed. That walk might have take 20 minutes. But in that 30-second, right, prepare for who you're going to be, you're like, I got everything I needed in that one statement.
Yeah.
For instance, I could have asked him that question at City Hall, but not gotten. And we were talking about a multitude of other things, but I wouldn't have gotten the answer until we actually got back to his car. He's like, that thing you asked me 5 minutes ago. It's kind of, remember when you're on your desktop computer, you got multiple windows open. Sometimes that's how men's minds operate. So one window is working, but it's not the one that's at the front of the screen. But I'll get back to it. And sometimes we don't like that. But another thing I'll say about male friendships is one thing that allows them to grow and build is when it's a place for me to take my cape off. Right? So if I'm this role to this group, like you talked about in the intro, how Pastor Bob, Pastor Rondell wear many hats. I need a place to take all those hats off and just be Rondell. A place where I don't have to be Superman for anybody.
Yes.
A place where I don't need to be anybody's hero. I don't have to have any answers. I don't have to. I can be almost a kid again. And when I find those spaces and with people that I feel safe to expose myself in that way, now you're seeing deep friendships amongst men start to grow.
Yeah, that actually leads me to something else that I was curious about. This is Living Well. We talk about all kinds of things. We try to be, transparent and give the people the real. I would love for each of you to talk about a friendship that you have. You don't have to disclose who it's with, that you think is special. It's connected and it's deep. And I would love to hear, like, specifically what makes that one special. Why did that one come to? What is it that guy gives you or that you get from that guy that is like, I got to hold on to this. This is,
So for me, it's this issue, I think, of being able to talk about anything and everything.
Yeah, that's important.
I think that when you are comfortable, you can do that. I think when you are not quite sure whether the person can handle your stuff, you're not going to lay it all out there.
Right.
And you have to be sure that whatever you tell that person stays with that person and is not going to be out all over the place. Somebody recently, my wife was speaking somewhere and they sent out an email and described her as their very good friend. They had never met. My wife didn't know who that person was. Okay? Was embellishing totally the conversation.
Oh my.
That's not a person you want to tell your business
Right.
to. Okay? Because you don't know where it's going to end up. I think that guys aren't going to sit and hold hands. We're not going to lock arms. We're not going to do all that kind of. We just want to know, do you have an ear that will understand? Can you offer some counsel? And can it be kept confidential? And those are basic requirements that I think most guys understand.
I agree with that. It's really just a piggyback on that. It's vulnerability. Can you take me in my rawest form? Like if I meet a new guy tomorrow, let's say we go to an event, we sitting at a table like this, maybe we eating, and I'm like, man, like he cracking jokes and we laughing. He got a great personality, not really standoffish, right? And you're like, okay, he's pretty cool. Then he's like, hey, let's exchange numbers or something like that. Let's say, he knows something about something. Like, oh yeah, let me hit you up. Well, text messages start, right, and you're building on something. And then let's say you invite them over to something. Hey, I'm having, the game on later. Come on. How he speaks there lets me know how intimate I can be with this relationship, right? Now, as a Christian man, I'm very protective of my private space.
Yeah.
Right.
I have to be, right? Because if he's not mature enough to handle my private space, then I know where I got to place him. It doesn't mean I get rid of him.
Right.
I just know where I need to place him, right? And I think that process for men is not a quick one because you don't really know, right? And if his maturity level is also like, if he says certain things that I'm like, I wouldn't do that. That wouldn't fly in the culture of the way that I live. Then again, I know, okay, where am I placing you? And so I'm trying to describe it. So there's this idea where I'm Christian, you're Christian. There's certain things you won't do that make me feel safe. But there's also certain things that you said that let me know that you're relaxed. And I'm like, okay, safe. I start to feel safe, right? There might be certain shows that you've seen, movies that you reference, that you may not even watch anymore, right? It might be something you watched before you got saved, but the fact that you was able to say, I watched that, and you saved and you got some standards to you, lets me know, okay, you safe. Because there are other men where they'll pretend like they ain't seen it. They'll pretend like they ain't been a part of it. They ain't never been there before. And so they trying to Christianese you. And I'm like, nah, no. I'm going to keep you on this.
Right.
On the outside, right? But I'm looking for, not that I'm looking for, but I will receive those that I can really be vulnerable with, and at the same time, they're not going to compromise who I am as a father, as a Christian, as a husband.
Right.
But I know if I crack a joke, he going to laugh.
Right.
And we both know we ain't living like this.
Right.
You know what I mean? We have an understanding that this is just a joke.
Yeah.
Versus the guy that's like, oh, we about to, like, no, okay. I understand this relationship, but I think you need that, right? I need somebody I can just be, you know what I mean, totally let my hair down with and laugh and chill and know it ain't gonna go further than that.
Right.
So important.
So what Rondell just described is he's that in my life. Like we both love Jesus. But we can talk about the Cosby Show. We can talk about Martin. If, in case you've already noticed, Rondell got movie references. So he and I'll be sitting around talking, and we'll talk about an old TV show from the '90s, and we're back in back down memory lane, as the song used to say. But at other moments, this brother is showing up for me. In my when life gets to life, and I need somebody to help me make sense of something, or something happened. And I'm deeply frustrated by it, but I still have to show up in those circumstances. I need a place to take the cape off. I need a place to show up. Calling it. Another person comes to mind, because you asked for a specific instance. I mean, I won't call his name because he'd be mad if I did. A couple years, like a year and a half ago, I got into a car accident at a stoplight. I was at a light waiting for the light to change. A car ran up my back, totaled my car. Praise God, I was able to walk away. My friend was getting ready to go out of town for a couple of months, and he had 2 cars at his house. He said, just go to my house, get a car. I drove this man's car for 5 months while he was out of town, until everything was settled with the legalities of it all. And I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten it. And he's always a phone call away. We don't talk every day. But we connect on matters of, and particularly with him, we also connect on, much like with Rondell, we connect on matters of the heart. So it's a place where I can share stuff that I'm really dealing with, because I don't have to bring you up to speed to communicate with you. One thing that's really important with men is, like, I don't need to teach you to get you to understand where I am, so that now I can communicate where I am. He just gets it. And he gets it in a way where it's like, you can tell me something. I don't feel like I ain't got time to teach you.
Right.
And now I got to help you understand where I'm coming from so that you can now be a part of the conversation.
Can't do both of those things.
Correct. Correct.
Exactly.
So that place where I don't have to decode my soul, where what I can speak as freely and it's understood and it's safe.
It's understood, and I'm not trying to qualify it
Right.
with you. You know what I mean?
Like, I still love Jesus, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to say something as to some things that Patrick said, just so that people can have context. Patrick and I have been knowing each other since 2016.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's 8 years. That is what is considered a new relationship with men. Just so that it's contextual, right?
Right.
We built to this. He's not somebody I knew in high school.
Right.
He's not somebody I knew in college. He's not even somebody I knew in my early 20s. So in man context, this is what you call a friendship that has been built in newness, and that's 8 years. My wife can meet somebody on the airplane tomorrow.
No question. No question.
And, and 2 weeks from now, they hanging out, they chilling, and they talking about all the stuff that's happening. And I'm like, y'all just, you know what I mean? Very, very different. And like you said, he became, like, after us testing each other, we realized, okay, this is a safe space, right? Versus I have 2 other people that I really confide in, my friends, Eric and Dondrick. Dondrick's my cousin. Grew up with him. Eric is somebody who's gonna die for you. Like he's that guy. Like, it don't matter what I do. It don't matter how bad it is. He like, what you need me to do.
What are we doing?
What are we doing? What are we doing? And we both Christian. He like, but listen, what we doing? I feel like you need one of those and I ain't gotta qualify it.
That's right.
I don't need to be
But you
perfect.
gotta know when to call that person.
You gotta know when to call.
Because you don't need them.
Exactly. You better know it.
Right.
If you call them at the wrong time, it's a problem. And again, I don't need to be perfect for him. I'm just me. He's just him, and we are completely vulnerable. And we've gone through these hills and valleys, and even times of absence, and we always find ourselves right back with each other. You know what I mean? And so I think that those things are, they're meaningful for me.
Yes. I'm just, listening. And again, we don't want to jump in because we want y'all to be able to talk, but it's just so rich. And also I just see all of your faces when you talk about the relationships that you have with other men in your life. And then I think about, as we mentioned earlier in the segment, this epidemic of loneliness and how many men don't have those connections. And what I really want to do, I'm mindful of the time, our segments, we try to keep them kind of brief. I'm mindful of the time. What I want to do is continue this conversation, and I want to shift it to talking about what can the church do to help facilitate these kind of connections among men, and then also bringing in youth. How can we help our youth, our young boys, realize how important having these friendships over a lifespan and then meeting them at different, how important those are. So this is what we're going to do, y'all. We're going to take this to an episode 2. This is going to be a cliffhanger. We're going to keep talking to these men as they drop wisdom. So we're going to end our episode today. We always like to leave you with a resource, and Pastor Bob has brought 2 books here for you. We have here Tony Evans' Kingdom Men Rising, and then Tony Evans' No More Excuses. Tell us briefly what the books are about.
So Kingdom Men Rising focuses on being a man of influence. So that would be not only in your household and in your profession, but also in your community. I think people spend a lot of time trying to conform and fit in as opposed to being an influencer. We talk about it on social media, but we don't talk about Christian men being influencers relative to both the church and the world. No More Excuses is just that. Stop making excuses for your behavior. Stop blaming your father for everything. Stop leaning on women when you ought to stand up and so forth. So it literally is teaching men how to be a man all over again, as opposed to this period or season we've had where we make excuse after excuse for why we can't do things and why we can't achieve.
I love it. I love it. Those sound like great books. If you have a man in your life, even if you're raising children, raising a son, these would be good books for them to kind of peruse through and get ideas about how they can live as men in the kingdom of God. So we're going to stop. You can find both of these books on Amazon. Right? You can get them on Amazon. So this is a resource. You can also find resources on our website, normalizehelp.org. Go there. But this is a cliffhanger. Remember, we're going to come back with part 2 and we're going to go a little deeper. So we thank you for being with us. And as always, we pray that you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
It's not too late to change, it's time to be the change. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. It's not too late to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, now it's time to change, now it's time to change.